What's up guys, MizzoFrizzo from Pitchfork Academy here, and in this Unreal Engine 5 tutorial I'm going to show you how to alter my weapon type system to allow you to store any weapons you like in any number of slots. So for example, I've got 3 slots here. If I pick up this assault rifle, it will spawn in my first slot. I could pick up this shotgun, it is spawned in my second slot, and if I pick up this pistol, it is in my third slot. And now if I press 1, it will change to whatever's in my first slot, 2, whatever's in my second slot, and 3, whatever is in my third slot. And if there's no empty slots and I go and pick up a new weapon, it will drop my current weapon. I've picked up the pistol from behind me there. I was overlapping with the pistol over there, but if I overlap with this assault rifle, I will drop a pistol and pick up the assault rifle instead. So if there is no empty slots, it will drop whatever I am holding and pick up that new weapon instead. Without further ado, guys, let me show you how to do this. Alrighty guys, so I'm here in my project, and the first thing I'm going to do is open up my BP first person character, and we are going to be using this spawn weapon logic right here. So I'm just going to grab my spawn weapon logic and move it down into some empty space down here. I've got a lot of code in this project, and the first thing I'm going to do before we start messing with this is I'm going to create a new variable that's going to store our weapons. So I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it weapons. Actually, I already have a weapons variable from my weapons system tutorial. I am just going to use this one. I am just going to change it to a, it's going to be weapon master object reference, change variable type. It will give you some warnings, and this will create some errors, but that's all right. That will sort of weed out the areas that we need to change. I'm also going to change this to an array, and it will also prompt me to change variable type. And now that we have that, we can compile and we can have a look at the errors in a moment, but also the default value of this weapons variable. Now, I'm going to have an unarmed state at 0, just in case you want to drop a weapon later on. I'm going to try and keep this set up as scalable as possible, but you don't necessarily have to have an index 0. I am just going to have an index 0, which is going to stay empty, and I'm going to put my 2 weapons in index 1 and index 2. And before we finish up today, I'll also show you how to add more weapons to this in case you want to have 3, 4, 5 slots. It will be very easily scaled to suit that need. Let's just have a look at these errors. And some of these will be in functions that we are going to change. So let's go ahead and change this function while we're here. And this is actually going to change to get weapon in slot, because we're not doing weapon types anymore. We're going to get weapon in slot. So I'm going to delete pretty much everything in here. I'm going to change this input to an integer, and I'm going to call it equip index, which is also another variable that we're going to have to create. So let's just go ahead and create that now. And this is basically just the current index of the weapon that you're using. So I'm going to create a new variable, call it equip index, if I can spell it, and change this to an integer. And I'm going to right click here to change this to a single, from an array to a single. I'm actually just going to drag this up here so it's right below my weapons variable right here. Nice. So what we will do is drag off of weapons here and get a copy, and we're going to get a copy at that equip index, and then we are going to check is valid. And we need to change these outputs here. We can just get rid of weapon type enum if you have that one. We just want a BP weapon master object reference, and that's going to be current weapon in slot. And this other one, I'm just going to change it to is valid. And I'm going to duplicate this return node, and on the isValid, I'm going to check isValid, and I'm going to plug this get node into the current weapon in slot. And then this one will return no object and false on the isValid, like so. Let's hit compile and have a look at the next error. Set current weapon type. We're not even going to be using that, so we can delete that. Hit compile again, look at the next error. This is all the weapon scrolling logic, so I'm just going to disconnect that for now, and that will get rid of those errors. And here we have our weapon switching logic as well. We can disconnect these, and actually while we're here, I am just going to get all of this logic here, just one of them, and I'll just move it over to with my spawn logic here, because we're going to use some of this for our weapon switching logic in a moment. Let's hit compile and look at the next error, set weapon of type. So this one we will also change to set weapon in slot. So we can get rid of this add node, and the inputs here, if we select the input node here, we can change these inputs to be equip index, which will be an integer, equip index, and the other one can stay as weapon to set. And what this is going to do is we can drag off of the array here and set array element. We are going to set the element at this equip index, and we'll pass the weapon to set through to the item here. Now, size to fit does not need to be checked, because when we created our weapons array, we added some elements here. So we don't need to add new elements, we just need to set them. So just make sure in your weapons array you add however many slots you want to have. And like I said, index 0 is going to be my unarmed slot. So I'm going to have an unarmed slot and then 2 weapon slots, like so. Nice. Okay, we can compile and check the next error. Equip index. So this is just my this is just some logic I threw together that would spawn a weapon on event begin play. So I would start with a pistol. So I'm just going to disconnect that, and our errors are dwindling here. Get current weapon. So our get current weapon is going to need to change a little bit here. We can delete this current weapon type, and we can just plug in our equip index. So this get current weapon function should still work now, because if we open up get weapon of type, this will not actually be get weapon of type anymore. This will be get weapon in slot. So sorry, I forgot to rename that. But that is starting to come together. So get weapon of slot was inside of get current weapon. That's right. So get current weapon is a pure function. It will just return the current weapon in the slot that is current. So the current equip index. And that's all we need to do in here. This next one is the set visibility, and this one will change significantly here. We can delete pretty much everything in the middle here, and we'll keep these isValids and these set visibilities because we will use that, and we'll drag off of our weapons variable here, and we'll do a for each loop. And for each array element, we are just going to check if the array element is equal to the result of our get current weapon function, which is a pure function. We can just plug that straight into there, and then do a branch off of here. And we'll plug these into the isValids. And if it is equal to our current weapon, we want to set the visibility to true. And if it isn't equal to our current weapon, we'll set it to false. And we can drag this array element over and plug it in here. And I will just also plug that reroute node straight into those ones as well, like so. Nice, very simple. That will work. We can hit compile now and we shouldn't have any errors. We can go back to our event graph and we now have some very nifty functions that will work with this setup. So we won't need this class defaults on the spawn weapon, and we will need this get weapon in slot. But what we might do, actually no, we won't need it. We can delete it. And we're going to create a new function that's going to check if any of the indices in our weapons variable are empty. So let's just create a new function, and I'm just going to call it check array for empty indices, something like that. And in here, I'm going to grab my weapons variable, and we are going to do a for each loop with break. So we're going to go through our array and check it. If any of these indexes are empty, we will return that index and we will break this loop. So we'll stop checking it. And if it completes and there are no empty indices, then we can return that there are no empty indices. This is basically to check if we have an empty index to spawn a new weapon when we pick it up. So what we can do is drag off the array index here, and I'm going to get a greater, and I'm going to check if it's greater than 0, because I'm using 0 as my unarmed slot. If you don't want an unarmed slot and you want to fill every single index of your weapons variable with a weapon, you don't need to do this. But I'm not going to do anything to my index 0, so I'm just checking if the index is greater than 0. I will put a branch on this, and if the index is greater than 0, I will also check if there's anything in that index. So I'll do that by doing an isValid. Whoops. And if it's valid, I'm going to do two things. Sorry, if it's not valid. So I'm checking for empty indices here. So is not valid means this index is empty, this array element. And if it is empty, I'm going to break my loop. Get a couple of reroute nodes here and keep this neat and tidy. And I might just put a print string here so we can see where our weapons are spawning, in what index our weapons are spawning. And that print string, I'm just going to print the array index like so. And I will also need a return node, add return node. And here I can add a couple of outputs. I'm going to make one called empty index. That's going to be an integer. And I will also return a Boolean, and I'll just call it is. It's not is index empty, it's is there an empty index. So I'll put is empty index, and this will be a Boolean. And here this will be true. So we'll set it to true, and we will return the array index like so. So this will go through our array, and as soon as it finds an index that doesn't have an object reference in it, this will return not valid. It will break the loop, and it will execute this return node and return what array index was empty, and this Boolean telling us that there is one that was empty. We can duplicate this return node down here, and actually I might also duplicate the print string down here, and I'll plug this into completed. So if this completes and isn't broken, so it does not find an empty index, this will return, and we can say no empty indices, and uncheck is empty index. So yeah, that should be all we need to do in here. This will work now. let's go back out to our event graph and we will call that on spawn weapon here. So when we go to pick up a weapon, the first thing we will do is check if there are any empty indices in our weapons array. We can drag off the is empty index and make a branch. And if there is an empty index, I might just delete that branch. And if there is an empty index, then the first thing we want to do is set our equip index to the index that is empty, the index that is returned right here. And this will plug into this reroute node, which basically skips the spawn pickup logic and destroy the old component and goes straight to adding a new component. And we do need to change some other stuff in here, but let's just finish off this spot right here. So if there isn't an empty index, we can go ahead and spawn a pickup of our current weapon. So get current weapon, plug this in here, whoops, and that will work. If there's no empty indices, we are basically going to replace our current weapon that we are holding. If there is an empty index, we're setting our equip index to that index and spawning a weapon in it. And you can see here our set weapon of type still has current weapon type plugged in. What we need to do is plug in our equip index, and set weapon of type will go ahead and set that index to that weapon, like so. The weapon that's being passed through is the one that's being spawned right here. And this should work now. We won't be able to switch between weapons just yet, but you will be able to see this logic kind of working, because if I hit play, I should be able to pick up one weapon, and then if I pick up another one, it won't spawn a pickup, and you'll see at the top left it has printed 2, because that's the index that was empty, that this one was put in. And if I pick up a different weapon now, it will drop my current weapon. It will always drop my current weapon, and you can see up the top left, it's printing no empty indices. So that is working, but to sort of see this in all its glory, we need to be able to switch between weapons. And I'm going to try and make this as scalable as possible, in case anyone wants to add more than 2 slots. So we are going to go down to this logic right here where we previously switched weapons. This is the one that I dragged over from over here, our weapon switching logic. And we're going to make some changes in here. We actually want to, we will use this get weapon in slot, but we're going to use it as part of a new function. And this is what I mean when I say I'm going to try and make this scalable. I am going to create a new function, and I'm going to call it check weapon in slot. Yeah, or just check slot. And it's going to have a lot of this stuff in it. What I might do is just grab everything except for the play montage, because a montage, play montage can't go in a function. So I will remove that play montage, and I will get all of this other stuff except for current weapon type. We're not going to use that. We're actually just going to set equip index. So I can replace that with the set equip index, and I can collapse all of this to a function. So I will select the rest of this, right click, collapse to function, and I'll just call it check slot. And let's open up check slot. And what we basically need to do in here is get the weapon in the slot that we pass through, and check if it's valid, and check if it's our current weapon, because we don't want to change weapons if it is our current weapon. We might be able to just refresh node. It should get rid of that old input that we had on there. I'm going to give check slot an input, and I'm going to call it equip index. This is going to be an integer. and this will plug straight into here, and I'll get a reroute node because I'm also going to plug it into this set equip index right here. And what we need to do is check if the current weapon in that slot is, let's get a not equal. We're going to check if it's not equal to the current weapon. So we can also get current weapon, plug it in there. And I will also want to check if it's valid. So I'm going to drag off this is valid and get an AND Boolean and plug this not equal into it. So if it is valid and it's not our current weapon, then we want to go ahead and switch to it. We'll switch to it by setting can fire to false. We don't want to be able to fire while we are switching. And then we will set these, the current weapon enum, in the animation blueprint for our animation blending and the hand sway multiplier. And we will also just return a Boolean to check if we should execute the montage after this function is done. So let's add a return node, and we'll give it an output, and we'll call it should change, question mark. We'll call that a Boolean, and we will set it to true. If this is true, all of this stuff will fire, and then we'll return this Boolean, which we can use on a branch after the function is done. I'll duplicate that return node and plug it into the false right here. So if we don't want to change, we can set this to false, like so. And now if we go back to the event graph, we've got this should change output. We can make a branch here, and if we should change, then we will play this montage like so. And when we press 1, we want this equip index to check to be 1. It depends how you've got this set up. If you're not using 0 as your unarmed slot, then maybe you want this to be 0. But I'm checking slot 1 like so. And I can just duplicate these. I can select the key press node and press this keyboard icon and press 2 to change the key press to 2, and plug that in and change the equip index here to 2 as well. And now I've got my 2 weapon system with 2 slots. So that should work perfectly now, with one exception. The can shoot, can fire that I'm setting here, in this particular project, I never added it to my firing logic. So wherever my firing logic is, I'm going to get my can fire and make a branch, because I do not want to be able to fire while I'm changing weapons. And that's all I need to do. So that should be working now. I'll grab a weapon. I've got my pistol. I can grab this. You can see up the top left, it's printing what slot it goes into. So 2. I can fire that weapon. I can press 1 and change to my pistol. I can press 2 and change back to my assault rifle, and that is working perfectly. I could walk up to any weapon, and if I don't have any slots, I can grab this shotgun. It will drop my assault rifle and change it with a shotgun. I could change this shotgun for a pistol. I could pull out my other pistol and change it for a shotgun. Whoops, wrong button there. And 2 will be my pistol, and 1 will be my shotgun. So that is working perfectly. It is storing these weapons in the appropriate slot. And if you want to make this to have 3 slots or more, it is very, very easy to change that. I will show you how to do that now. I can select my weapons array, and I can just add another index, and then I can copy these switching nodes, and I can change this one to a press of the 3 key and change the equip index to my 3rd index and plug this in. And that is literally all we have to do to make that change, because this check array for empty indices is now checking this array, and now it has an extra index to be empty. So now I've got 3 indexes. I can grab a pistol, I can grab an assault rifle, and I can grab a shotgun. And now these have stored in whatever slot was the next empty slot that was there when I picked it up. So I could change the shotgun for an assault rifle, and now in my second slot and my third slot, I have assault rifles, and I have a pistol here. I can change that for a shotgun. Now I've got a shotgun and 2 assault rifles, and it is successfully changing the visibility of each weapon and changing the current weapon there, because we're using that equip index. So that is all working very well indeed. Guys, that's it. If this tutorial has been of any use or value to you whatsoever, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.